Welcome to the NEREJ NYREJ podcast. I'm your host, Rick Kaplan. My guest today is Lehman with Lehman Strategic Partners. And Clay is going to tell me a little bit about how your journey went to get to where you are today. First, tell me a little bit about your company and how you started in that.
Sure. So I started my career in accounting. I'm a CPA. I'm still a licensed CPA, even though I haven't practiced in many, many years. And I spent a few years in accounting and then moved into a couple other areas before real estate. But what brought me into real estate was working for Pulte Homes here in Central Florida. That was in 2005, a very good time to be in that market, but quickly became a bad time. 2008, I moved to a mortgage lender where I managed their REO portfolio, and that was sort of my first direct experience in real estate. And then from there, I moved into my own brokerage, a couple other different paths, property management. Now I have a title company. Now I'm coaching real estate agents on the big thing is strategy. A lot of times we come into real estate not really understanding how to grow and scale a business, and that's what I bring to the agents is I teach them how to, grow their business with marketing and business development strategies, and then manage it in a manner that doesn't destroy their lives with operational strategies. And all of that, I'm weaving in what I'm learning about AI and the power that it has in helping you grow your business and manage your business in a manner that doesn't burn you out.
So, Clay, tell me what are you doing that is helping the uh, real estate brokers? Yeah, is this mainly for brokers you're talking about?
Agents,
Yeah.
brokers, lenders, property managers, really anybody in the real estate space. I mean, the biggest thing that I start with is helping them understand their customer's journey. It's hard to market to someone if you don't understand them or what's going to bring them to you. And that's a huge thing that AI can help with in a manner that we've never had access before. The kind of stuff that you can create using AI models about your customer would have cost you thousands of dollars in the past, and now you can create it yourself in minutes. But that's where we start. We start with looking at what is the path the client's going to take from where they are to where you are. And then we look at how does your marketing, how effective is it in taking them from where they are to where you want them, which what I find most of the time, it's not very effective because, like I said, we lack strategy. I think we're all very self-reliant as entrepreneurs, but sometimes that leads us to, do things on our own that might be better left to have an expert walk you through. And I mean, the reason I feel like I can speak so confidently about these things is that's exactly what I did. When I started my business, I didn't really think I had to have marketing, but after a while, I realized, okay, I really need to. But then I was doing it myself, and it was just a smattering of tactics, not really a strategy. And that's the big thing I help with. And then as you grow your business, as I'm sure you and your listeners know, it can become more and more of a prison if your operations aren't sound and your processes aren't, running smooth, and you have to have a team to kind of help you, or you're never going to take a vacation. And so that's kind of the next step of the process is we help you grow the business and then work with you to figure it out. But
So
I definitely, I'd love to answer any questions you have that you think would be valuable to your audience.
give me an example of uh, what process you would use to when you implement AI for a client.
Yeah, that I'm happy to. I would, so the thing that someone could do today would be and I think this is the biggest, it's not the sexiest thing in the world, but it's the number one thing that's going to unlock you from being trapped at your desk or whatever, or trapped by your job. And that is to document your processes. And like I said, it's not like the big sexy thing everybody wants to talk about, but the way that I coach people to do it is from Dan Martell's book, Buy Back Your Time. And in it, he describes what he calls the camcorder method. And he jokes that that ages him a bit because he literally used to do it using a camcorder. But now You can use a tool called Loom, which isn't an AI tool. It has AI components, but Loom is a screen capture tool that's free. You can record yourself completing a process. You It captures what's on the screen and it also captures what you say, and then it creates a transcript. You take that transcript and you can load it into an AI tool and say, please turn this into a process document. Then you can take both the transcript and the process document and load them into a tool called Google Notebook LM, which is also free. And what Google does with that is it turns that data into something your team can chat with, meaning they can ask natural language questions and it will tell them how to do their jobs based on the process that you created. It's the number one quickest way to kind of get yourself up and running. Even if you don't yet have a team, it'll make it so much easier when you go to hire someone. You can also then, like once you've documented a process, I coach people on a framework. And again, none of this can I take credit for. This is all stuff I've learned over the years from other people. But a framework called Eliminate, Automate, Delegate. And that's where you look at your process and look what parts of it can you eliminate. There may be things that you're doing that you don't have to do anymore. I always talk about how when I was in an earlier business, it was in my property management business, we produced a particular report every month. And I went to my VP of operations and I said, hey, why do we produce this report again? And she goes, oh, client so and so needs that. And I said, but they haven't been a client for 6 months and we were still producing this report. And it's that kind of thing that just sucks the life out of it or the time out of your business. So that's eliminate. Then you look at in the process, there's a lot of tools available now to automate, our processes. So we look to see what can we automate. And then if we can't automate it, then we look to see can we delegate it. And that's something that, it starts with documenting your processes and then moves through to applying that framework and then ultimately ends up freeing up your time so that you can focus on higher return activities.
So you put together like a business plan and then you submit it into AI and AI analyzes that and figures out what's working, what's not working, and or makes it figures out a way to streamline everything.
Exactly. Effectively, that's right. So like if I were to sit down and document a process, just manually, I would sit and think for a time and I'd say to myself, well, I do this and then I do that and I think I do this. And it would probably read pretty poorly because, I don't write that great. But by putting it into AI, I don't have to worry about spelling, grammar, structure. Like it's going to do all that for me. And then, yeah, I'll ask it, what am I missing? What are some risky areas? What's some controls that we need to have in place? What are some best practices? So AI can flesh out that process. I mean, it's literally like having a process expert sit with you and write out your process. And that's true. And I'm talking about processes, but that's true of your marketing, your content, really anything. AI is sort of your expert companion that you just, and the thing about it is it's so funny. People think it may take technical skill. If you can write an email or send a text or even just have a conversation, you can use AI. It's that simple.
Now, I have had people on this show that have marketing companies,
Sure.
and they're all talking about AI right now. So as far as, you're you're taking the marketing and just bringing it in-house by using the AI.
Yeah, effectively, yes, sir.
So what parts of the marketing does it break down, or does it uh, will it do everything, or do you
Yeah, I
have
mean, that's a
pieces?
relative term. People define everything in different ways. It'll do everything up to, it doesn't do distribution as well, meaning, so if I could, I'll just walk you through my process. So, what I typically do is I write two blog articles a week, which I write with an AI tool. And again, and nothing, or I should say, very little that I'm talking about are exclusively paid tools. I use the tools that I use primarily are ChatGPT, Gemini, which is Google's AI model, and Claude, which is similar to ChatGPT. But what I do is I go in and I tell the AI model what topic I want to talk about that week, and then I share with it my thoughts on that topic. one of the big objections I get from people when I talk to them about using AI for their marketing or for, for writing or content is I don't want to lose my authentic voice. And I couldn't agree more, which is why I don't just say to the AI model, hey, write me an article about how do I acquire a commercial building in Ocala, Florida. I would say, hey, my title or topic is acquiring commercial property in Ocala, Florida, and here's everything I know about it. And I'll do a brain dump for, a minute or two of everything that I know about the topic. And then I'll share, these are some of the things that I want to include in my article. And then it writes it. And then I read over it, make sure that I'm good with what's being said, that it captured my voice. I may tweak a couple things. Now that may sound involved, but I'm talking about a 5 minute process to write, a 1,200 word blog. Now I post that to my website. You can automate that, but AI doesn't necessarily post it to my website. So that's when I say distribution, that's what I'm referring to. But now here's where the real power, in my opinion, comes in, and that's with content leveraging. So, there's a lot of pressure on us to be posting frequently in all these different places on social media. And who has time for creating and posting and all that? And that's a big problem for us busy small business owners. So, to address that by using that long form blog, I can put that article into the AI model and say, I want you to create 5 Facebook posts, 3 LinkedIn posts, and 2 Instagram posts based on this blog. And it'll create the copy for you and even will make suggestions on the imagery that you could use for it. And then you take that and then you post that on, for yourself on these different platforms. It speeds up the process tremendously and it'll create, like, so for example, you want your content to be platform compliant, meaning Facebook's better, like people like emojis in Facebook, but not necessarily in LinkedIn. Well, it'll create these things in a platform optimized manner with very little input on your part. And so that's where I see, things moving that way. You can create your email drip campaigns. And again, I'll refer back to where I started in the beginning. The whole process starts with knowing your client, knowing your ideal customer. So the first thing that I encourage people to do, and when I'm working with a client, the first thing we do is we identify who their ICP, their ideal client profile. Then I create a deep research report on that client profile. And deep research is a mode that is available in various AI models. I prefer Gemini. You go in and you just tell it, I want a deep research report on, commercial developers in New England area. And I want to know their demographics, their psychographics, their pain points. What questions are they asking and where do they gather? Deep research differs from a normal chat search. Normal chat search might take, or a chat response might take 20 seconds. Deep research is literally what it sounds like. It does a deep dive into the topic. So it may take 5, 10, or 15 minutes, but instead of getting back a one-page answer, you get back 15, 20, 30 pages of information on your ideal client. Now, truth be told, I don't sit down and read all of that. I feed it back into my chat GPT. So I'll pull that out of my Gemini report, and then I'll feed that into chat GPT and say, this is my ideal client. Help me structure a marketing plan to reach this client. And it's amazing what it'll produce for you.
So, is this a good way of kind of scouting for new clients?
I think so. I mean,
Okay.
it's,
Well, let me just
please.
uh, add to that. Do you ever hear of fencing or fake
Oh,
fencing?
geofencing?
Geofencing, yes.
I'm
Where it
familiar
can
with
pull
it, but
that
not an expert.
information. Yeah. Is that something that it's capable of doing for you?
I don't know if it'll do it for you, but it can walk you through it. Like if you were to say, this is my ideal client, I want to, I want to do a geofencing campaign to reach them where they are. I'm sure that the results would walk you through it. That's one of the things I love about using AI. One of my, core values is continuous improvement, and I love learning. And there is no better teacher than AI. It's incredible what it can teach you to do. You literally ask it to teach you anything, and it pretty much will do so. It's kind of like, we all YouTube University is a great way to learn. Well, this takes it up a notch because like when you Google a question, you have to look through the answers to kind of find the best answer. I mean, I'm not downplaying the amazing tool that Google is, but now with AI, there's a tool called Perplexity that is like Google on steroids, where when you ask it a question, it pulls together all of the answers, assimilates them, and then produces for you the how to, much more plain language, step by step, walk you through it. So, in your example of geofencing, that's my approach would be to take my ideal client profile, feed it into chat or Gemini or one of the AI models, and then say, I want to do a geofencing campaign targeting this ideal client. Walk me through that process, and you'll get a step by step to walk you through it.
So that, and I know of a lot of real estate people,
Hmm.
what residential and commercial, that are doing something on that geofencing type of uh, I would call it scouting
Yeah,
because it kind of pulls out all the people that have gone onto the internet at some point looking for something that you might be able to help them with.
yeah.
And that's how I think of geofencing. I
So
couldn't remember the name at the beginning, but
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
let
No,
you
no,
bring
it's
it back.
great. No, what I like the way I think about what you're talking about is in that when I talked about having the information of where your ideal client hangs out, the idea around that is something in one of Russell Brunson's books, where he talks about how when he was in college and internet forums were kind of a new thing, he was a college wrestler and he noticed that when they were in study hall, none of them were studying. Everybody was on the same wrestling forum. And it gave him the idea that, my ideal client is interested in things. They hang out somewhere. Someone has already congregated this group of people. For me to connect with that group of people, I need to go to that place, add value, and then they will connect with me. And so, like for me, for example, every morning I have about 10 Facebook groups that I go and I post something. And it's never about me. It's always something that I believe will be of value to the audience. And my goal is for them to then click on my name to see my profile. My profile picture, or I should say the banner, above my profile
Right,
picture, has a call to action inviting them to connect with me. So think about it almost like baiting a trap, which sounds like I'm not trying to bait anybody into anything, but just the idea being
right.
I'm leaving little breadcrumbs to try and get them to move them from, and in this case, it's the Facebook group they're in, to then be curious about what I'm doing and check me out. And then I have to tell them the next step to take. And that's the big missing piece that I see in most real estate strategies is that we are marketing to people at different stages, but we're not telling them how to move from stage A to stage B to stage C. And we really have to be very explicit with people to say, when they look at so for example, you might post content, a Facebook post or a LinkedIn post. That should always have some call to action to the next step you want them to take. So if you wrote an article and you say, hey, if you enjoyed this, sign up for my email newsletter, that would be a great example of that call to action to move them forward. I may have gotten off track there. I apologize. I get going, Mr.
No,
Cat. I
no,
appreciate
I understand that. I appreciate you giving us that follow through because I happen to do that myself. I'll read someone's content that I might not even know who they are, but then I go to check out who they are that wrote that kind of content. So you're absolutely right. That does work.
Yes, sir.
It does bait me, it catches me. So the bait works.
I got you.
Yeah,
Oh,
they hook me and I do follow it. So what would you recommend? No, let me go back
yeah,
a
yeah,
step
sure.
because I deal with a lot of law firms, and a lot of law firms are starting to implement AI, And they do put it in place, but after it does its whole thing and might go through a whole contract and put a whole contract together, they have to spend the time and go through it again
Yeah,
because you just can't trust that.
absolutely.
And they make their changes and then it's good to go. But it saved them quite a bit of time to assembling that whole thing with
Sure.
the AI. So when you talk about AI, what kind of limitations do you find that you're running into by using AI?
Well, that's a great question. Like, so one of the things that drives me crazy with my AI tools is when it writes something and then says, gives a fake example or a fake case study or fake information. So AI is it's like a people pleaser for the most part. It really wants to make you happy and do a good job for you. And it knows that the information, case studies, examples are really great things for people when they're reading an article. It helps bring it home, but it will make them up. And so, I always reread my stuff to make sure that there are no fake case studies or examples. The other thing it'll do is it'll include statistics. And for the most part, they're going to be, well, I guess I don't want to say for the most part they'll be accurate. What I want to say is it's easy to check them. Again, I mentioned that tool Perplexity. So it is the most accurate in terms of, statistics and things of that nature, but it's not as good at writing. So if I write an article and it cites any statistics or facts, I take the article and I feed it into Perplexity. I just copy and paste it in and ask it to fact check the article. And it generally will do that. It'll fact check it and find any falsehoods or any statistics that aren't correct. The models are getting better every day. But those are the big frustrations that I run into in terms of just making sure that it doesn't include anything that's not accurate. And I don't want anybody to be scared of the idea that, well, is it gonna, no, I mean, that's why you have to reread it. I mean, you nailed it, is that it's sort of the trust but verify. I like to think of it as an intern. If I had an intern in my business that, just graduated from a great college and knew everything, I would 100% ask them to do things for me. But before I gave that to a third party, I'd take a real close look at it. And that's kind of how I treat AI. And you can put in some stopgap measures. Like I say, you could have one model create and then another model check it. Those things are helpful. But those are the big things that I look out for, is just make sure that, in its efforts to help you, it didn't include anything that you would find inaccurate or wouldn't want to include in your information.
Now, would it also, if you had a property that you're looking to either invest in or you're trying to put it on the market,
Yeah.
you put the property into AI and let it do its thing, and then it will come back with, how much the cap rate is going to be on that property, all the different stats that you need to make it viable.
I would, that it will, but it's not as good as you are. It's not as good as, you or your audience probably is at calculating those things. If I were doing that, I would do that. I 100% like, so I'm a real estate investor as well. Like I have, a new build that I have on the market right now. And I put it through AI to try and help me identify who's the most likely buyer for this property. And again, how do I reach that person? What are the things that are going to resonate with them so that it can help inform my marketing of the property? I also will put in there, ask it to help me find comps, but it's almost like going to Zillow and looking at the Zestimate. It's only as good as the data it can scrape. It's going to be better, but I wouldn't price my property or make an investment, based on a AI calculated cap rate. Now let me be really clear that there may be specifically trained tools or apps that you have access to that can do this. I'm not speaking about those. I'm speaking specifically about simply going to an open model like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini and saying, what's the cap rate of 123 Happy Meadows Lane? So if you have a tool and it's working great, or you can verify, that's the big thing. I would just verify the results. I mean, I think it's a great starting point. It's low effort. I mean, one of the things, so I still list foreclosures all these years later. We still get a handful of foreclosures through here, and I list them. And one of the things that we have to do is we have to create, broker price opinions with all kinds of verbiage in there that, help inform the investor about information. I use AI for that all day long. I've got it formatted now to understand what information I need for my BPO, and I ask it to create that info. But what I don't pull from there is the comps. That's something that I feel like I have to do. I might use it to give me, some suggested comps, but then I would double check to see if there aren't better ones available. So that's a really, really long way for me to say that yes, you can get that information, but I would spend some time verifying it.
So there's limitations to the AI at this point. That could change down the road as well.
Exactly. Yep, you nailed it.
So, right now, when you go to look at a property and you have to find out what the environmental issues might be there. So you need some kind of history of what went on, things like that. Now, AI could give you that kind of information.
I think, I haven't ever done that, but as soon as you started saying that, I started thinking to myself, that would be a really interesting use case. Because I have to imagine you could say, I'm looking at the property and give it the address and ask it for a history of what's been there in the past. Because, right, if there's like, oh, yeah, it was a Shell gas station for 40 years,
Right.
be like, oh, I might
Uh,
want to check this out.
there was
I
a
bet it could,
nuclear,
but
yeah,
to be clear, I've
nuclear
never
plant in
done
the
that. But
backyard.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. No, I think you could. I think it could, especially, and I guess it would also depend a little bit on your area. If your area is pretty open with the, permits and data being easily accessible, then it would do a pretty good job, I would think. But yeah, that would be, I might mess around with that later today just to kind of see what comes up, because I bet you would. I know those environmental studies can be a real pain, real kick in the,
Well,
you
it
know
could be
what.
very costly if you
Exactly.
get involved well, most developers usually kind of do a preliminary
Sure.
check and make sure that they're not getting into something that's going to be way over their head unless
Exactly.
it's
Yes, sir.
really worth it. But
Yep. Yeah, that's a
no,
that's an interesting use case. I'm confident it would provide value. If not, I certainly wouldn't use it in place of an environmental study, but it
oh
could be like
yeah,
a part of your initial due
right.
diligence to look for red flags.
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head. Due diligence. It
Yeah,
does a lot of the due diligence for you.
it can
Obviously, you
assist.
have
Yeah.
to go back and you have to recheck a lot of that yourself, but it
What
gives you things to recheck, you know.
what I would do, I'm just thinking out loud here, is rather than do that in just like a normal search, I mentioned deep research. I would do it in a deep research search. So, and I would assume a lot of your audience uses either Gmail or Google Workspace, and that gives you access to Gemini. And in Gemini, there's a mode for deep research. And I would just simply say, I want to know everything there is to know about 123 Happy Meadows Lane. Give me all the permit history, all the any code violations, whatever. I'd probably just take my due diligence checklist, feed it in, and say, do this. Now, again, I wouldn't take it for granted. I would then double check it, but I bet you it would give you a great head start on your due diligence.
Now, okay, now I got one that could be a sticky situation.
All right, let's hear it.
At multifamily properties, and you said your project property management have a
Yeah.
property management company. Tenant issues sometimes can be a problem.
Yeah.
So, what happens if you have if someone applies, for a lease and they tour up apartments left and right along their travels?
Hmm.
Now, there was supposed to be someone said there was supposed to be like a blacklist for a
Yeah.
tenant, which that never really is. But what happens if you put that information into AI, this person, or you take their application and put it through AI? does AI go back and try to find situations like that, or or can it do
I
something?
don't know. That's a good question. I don't think so, simply because I don't think the repository of data isn't out there. I think that you could definitely do a search on the person to see certain things. It's not going to pull their credit. It's not going to, but it may flag. One of the things that we tried to look out for was like, if a tenant like habitually left terrible reviews for prior property managers, not because we don't, we're scared of the reviews, but we wanted to see what did the landlord say in response. Because a lot of times, people get evicted and get mad at the landlord,
Right,
post a bad review, and then the landlord would respond and say, "You haven't paid rent in 6 months," or something like that. But
right.
it won't. I just because we don't have that blacklist. We used to kind of chat about that with some of my mastermind friends or whatever in property management. But I've never seen anything like it's where that information exists. So I'm not sure how it would find it. But I like the idea. Sign me up if you get it going.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I understand with the privacy acts we have in place and things of that nature,
Sure.
but
I think that's
it,
the big thing. I mean, I know for me, I'd be a little worried about getting sued because it's such a litigious area. But
yeah,
it
I mean, I
seems
just
like,
I know people that have, have had issues with
oh, sure,
people punching the holes in the walls and the doors and then blaming the landlord doesn't come and fix it. It's the landlord.
right.
Everything is the landlord's fault.
Tell me about
But
it.
then they destroy the apartment. Then they move out because and after they haven't paid rent in months,
Exactly.
and then they move into another place and do the same
Do the
exact
same thing
thing.
all over again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure there's no way to prevent that, really.
It's
Yeah.
tough, it's definitely a challenge. Because even, we would do prior landlord verifications, but again, landlords are afraid of being sued, so they limit what they'll say. That's a tough one. I don't think AI's solved it yet, but hopefully someday.
Yeah. Well, that's something that can be worked on.
That's right.
Yeah. So as far as before you started using AI,
Yes, sir.
did you have staff, a bigger staff, and
Yeah,
has it have given you the ability to cut down on some of your staff?
I think what it's done, the short answer would be, yeah, I believe so. One, because I'm doing things that I wasn't doing before, that if I had wanted to do them, I would have to hire. Like I mentioned before, I'm posting, I'm writing 2 blog articles a week and posting like 20 or 30 times a week on social media, or probably more at this point. I would have had to hire a full-time content manager to do that in the past. Now I do it with my cup of coffee in the morning. In my title business, I've been able to, one of the things that I use it for is to create our, I mentioned the first thing I think I mentioned was about the process manual. And so we've been able to document all our processes, load them into Google Notebook LM, and then what it does is it makes everybody a little more efficient. So I think I'm able to do more with less. I haven't been able to like create my automated AI bookkeeper and then not have a bookkeeper, or, my automated AI, you name it. But I think that it makes us all able, it has enabled us to all to do more with less. So I won't have to hire as many people to do the work that I want to do. I think there are some areas that in short time, we'll start to see, people are going to shift out of those roles into, something different. Reception, I think the AI voice models are getting really, really, really sophisticated. The big thing that clues you in these days, if you're talking to AI, is just that the pause between answers is a little longer, but the natural language and even the emotion that it's able to capture now makes it really, it's close. And you can set up, an AI receptionist, AI, answer a lot of questions. So I think it'll those are some things we'll start to see move into more AI. I mean, just like when you pull up to the drive-throughs now, there's a 50% chance that you're ordering with an AI, chatbot that and not a human. And a lot of times you don't even realize it.
Right.
So in my job, yeah, it's created efficiencies. I'm happy to say that we've been able to grow our business in a manner that I haven't had to add people, but we've grown. So it's not been an eliminator, but it's certainly made us more efficient.
So it's helped you to grow, pretty
Oh,
much.
without a doubt.
And and I do understand the automation of using AI. Unfortunately, some people like me, I'm kind of an old timer, I could have a conversation with that AI and not realize it's
Yeah,
not real. But so
it's true.
yeah, so I mean, it does become uh, very human-like, I want to say. So
No, it is. It's incredible.
which is a positive thing and a negative thing because now you say, well, it's eliminating the human factor, so you don't have that human interaction. What's it going to do for socializing and things of that nature in the
No, I
future?
agree. And
Yeah.
that's I'm, as a social sort of outgoing person that enjoys, meeting people, I'm hopeful that what it'll do is kind of remove some of the more rote interactions, the more kind of repetitive, less personal, and then really shine a light on the value of relationship. Like I was on a podcast yesterday and the gentleman was asking me about, what if this was a threat to real estate agents, to be eliminated at some point. And I think there's always, I think we should all be paying attention as entrepreneurs to the risk of elimination. I always think about Blockbuster, how it felt like overnight you went from seeing a Blockbuster on every corner to then seeing a red box, in your Publix, which
Right.
was so funny to me. It's like, I felt like I would think to myself, man, it was like 6 months ago that to rent a movie, I had to go into a storefront that had four employees running around. And now I just go into Publix and now you don't even do that. You just, it's as easy
Download
as
it on
choosing
your
a
TV.
channel.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I never say never. I don't see AI as being the thing that replaces real estate agents because it can have the knowledge and the information, but there's the experience factor, and then also just there's a relationship factor in real estate that would be really challenging for AI to replicate. The question becomes when does the value and cost of the relationship factor, when will the AI efficiencies or the whatever you want to call it help enough to make it worth the person saying, well, I don't need the relationship. I think that's a long way away.
Yeah, and
Um,
I also think there's a line that gets crossed with technology and human abilities. And if it crosses that line, it becomes very messy.
yes,
Say like I was watching the news yesterday. There was these kids in California that the autonomous vehicles
yes,
that are
yeah.
running around.
Hmm.
So there's no driver in there, and these kids are all jumping on the cars, and they're playing around with the cars because there's no one in them.
Oh, that's
So
crazy.
they were kind of doing damage. Just
Sure.
screwing up the computers. That's the line.
Right. Yeah.
The human and the computer, it has to be separated at some point.
Yep.
There's things
No, I
that
agree.
yeah, I don't think you can take away some things from the human ability, you
I
know.
agree.
So
That's when I talk, there's obviously there's a lot of skepticism among I think the general public, but also real estate agents in particular around working with AI and the concern. Like I had a post a couple weeks ago and a lady commented that this is what it was about positioning yourself as the market expert using AI. And she took that as just go into AI and say, hey, make me the market expert. And that wasn't my intent. My intent was use AI to flesh out what makes you the market expert. And that's the distinction. Like, yes, someone can go and say, I'm in Ocala, Florida, and say, hey, I want to, be positioned as an expert here in Ocala, Florida. Tell me everything there is to know about real estate in Ocala, Florida. They're going to get a lot of good information, but they're not going to get experience. They're not going to get wisdom. They're not going to get, the real boots on the ground info that make you as an agent, as that person with that wisdom and experience, the real go-to expert. So, I like to think of it as an enhancement, not a replacement. And if you think of it in that manner, then and there's no threat to it in terms of just go in there and start asking questions, describe a problem that you're dealing with, and see what
Right.
kind of solutions it gives
Well,
you.
it is an enhancement, but it
Yeah,
also creates a lazy work environment because
it
now it
can.
does a lot of the work for many. And that's where that that line gets crossed because
Yeah,
you know it's like what happened with cell phones and calculators and computers, all those things.
I
It's
agree.
it's taken away a lot of the things that uh, have made humans far above the computers
Right.
at one point.
If you let it. I mean, that's like, for example, with my kids when we're doing homework and they're like, Dad, why do I have to know this stuff? I can just ask chat. I'm like, yeah, you can just ask chat, but you have to know how to apply the knowledge, and getting the knowledge from a machine doesn't tell you how to apply it. I mean,
Exactly.
and listen, I was whining about doing my math homework, 30 or 40, golly, however many years ago. But now I appreciate that if I didn't know how algebra or geometry worked, yeah, I could find the answer. But when it comes to applying it to a situation, like, that's what my kids ask me, like, do you use any of this stuff? And I'm like, yeah, man, I think algebra. I think, in my investing, like you have to know how to calculate certain things. And just because you can ask for it doesn't mean you understand how the numbers all work together. And AI is the same way, meaning, yeah, it can enhance your access to information, but you have to know how to apply that information. And that's the human factor.
Yeah, I mean, I just the more and more technology we implement into our society, the the less we know.
Sure.
A perfect example when you go into a store and something is 75 cents and you give them $1. Well,
No, when
what's
it's
the
70,
change? Is
it's when
that
it's
yeah.
the real issue is when it's 76 cents and you give them a
Well,
dollar and a
exactly.
penny. And I'm like, what do you want me to do with this penny?
Right.
But let me tell you, I do want to share like a story or an illustration that comes to mind for me often. And that is, it was, I can't remember what book I was reading this in, but it was about Henry Ford. And Henry Ford was suing a newspaper that published an article that basically called him dumb. And he was called to the stand by the attorneys, and they started asking him factual questions to prove that he was not very smart. How many acres was in the Louisiana Purchase, and various things of that nature. And he said, "Listen, I have a little box on my desk with 12 light up buttons. I can hit any one of those buttons and I can access the world's foremost expert in what you're asking me. And I can find the answer to the question." He said, "What you're asking me doesn't prove anything." And I thought to myself when I heard that, I'm like, so that's Henry Ford. And he was at the time one of the richest people in the world. And his access to information came through this little box. It's a telephone on his desk. Well, today, even the poorest people on the planet, not the richest people, they have access to this device that gives them access to all of the world's information at their fingertips. That's how much information has been democratized or distributed throughout the world. We now have all that access to that information that the richest person in the world had 100 years ago. And it's only advancing. So what that means to me is that the access to the information used to be a separator. By having access to information, you were separated from the rest of the world. That's not true anymore. Now it's knowing what to do with the information that's going to separate you from the rest of the world. And I think that's an exciting thing, an exciting time to be alive that I think about it all the time. Like when I have a question about something, a fact comes up on TV or a person, and I'm like, what other movies have they been in? Well, before the internet and before AI, or before the internet, really, you just didn't know. You just either knew it or you didn't know it. Well,
Right.
now you just type a couple buttons and now you know it. And I think that's an exciting thing that we all have access to the information. And now it's a race to figure out who's going to apply it the best.
Yeah. The only problem is that, you know, how much of that letting the humans retain because they're not actually finding out the information.
That's
They're
true.
just putting it in and getting it back. It's someone else. It's a computer that's their brain now.
It's a fair
You know,
point.
I'll end this with this one example that I
Sure.
was staying at this hotel and I wanted I only had a 20 and I wanted to give the valet, I wanted to give him a $5 bill. You know, he was getting my car.
Yep.
So I asked the guy at the desk, asked him if he could give me, I changed the 20. Could you give me two fives and two tens for the 20? And you know, he gave me two fives and two tens. So that goes to show you, you know, he's depending on something else to give him the
Sure.
information, you know. And I'm a nice guy, and I gave him the 10 back, you know, told
I
him
was
that,
going to
well,
ask if that's your get rich quick scheme.
yeah. So, you know, that makes me happy that I got the extra 10,
Right.
but it makes me sad that this
It
is
was
what
that
our world
easy.
has come to, you know, that people can't think on their own.
Certainly.
So he was young, and that's what our young people are kind of, you know,
Customer's always right. He was trying to make you happy. It just was
yeah.
going to, when he went to balance his register at the end of the night, he was going to be $10 short.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if they do that anymore. Who knows?
Who knows?
They
It's
they have a computer that
That's
balances it.
right.
Well, Clay, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Lots of great information. If someone wanted to get more information from you, if you're willing to give more
Oh yeah,
information,
absolutely.
uh, how would they get a hold of you? You have a website?
Yeah, the website is just www.imclaylayman, LEHMAN.com. My email is clay@imclaylayman.com, or the only thing I'll plug, my Facebook group. I have a Facebook group for what I call AI curious real estate professionals, and it's called Unstuck AI for Real Estate. If you plug in Unstuck AI, it'll come up.
Okay, and you can also find all that information in the podcast platforms that the show is on, as well as on YouTube. It will be at the end in the credits.
Perfect. Perfect.
So, Clay, again, thank you very much for coming on. We're
I
talking with,
appreciate it.
well, my pleasure. We're talking with Clay.
Anytime.
Okay, we're talking with Clay Lehman, and he's with Lehman Strategic Partners. And I'm Rick Kaplan from the New England and New York Real Estate Journal. Until next time.